What is going on, guys? Dave PigskinPapers and I are back. Well, sort of. This is episode 1 of Dave and I's new show, which has no name, but will soon, we hope. We took a couple of weeks off, but I'm excited to talk some football and fantasy. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. We skipped the last 2 weeks for a variety of reasons that couldn't be avoided, and a lot's happened in the NFL and in fantasy football too. So I'm excited to get back after it tonight.
Absolutely. Before we get into our discussion tonight, let the people know where they can find you on Twitter, Dave.
Yep, I'm at Pigskin Papers. Both of those P's are capitalized. I post my content there, but also on my website, which is thepigskinpapers.com. 2 articles a week during the football season. I'll have my weekly fantasy preview up tomorrow morning, and my waiver wire column went up on Tuesday morning. Paul, where can people find you on Twitter and talk about any content you got?
Yes, guys,
and the like.
Sorry about that, Dave. Here we are. We're working out the kinks already. Guys, I'm Paul Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Ryan15. As far as content goes, you can find my Dallas Cowboys focused podcast every Monday night at 9 p.m. on Twitter and YouTube. And on every Friday night, you can find us on Twitter and YouTube as well as we do. Sometimes we do a sneak peek if we can't find a guest, just kind of discussing what we think might happen during the game. Or we'll have a guest, and our series is called Offsides, where we bring on a guest of the opposing team the Cowboys are playing, and we talk about what it's like being a fan of the opposing team, how they feel about the team situation and what they expect for the game. So that's always a fun episode. I like working with, guests of opposing teams.
I can't wait for, what is it, week 15, 16, when the Cowboys and Dolphins play each other. It's going to be fun.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. I know I know you're more of a Dolphins fan, but it'd be nice if you could come on and talk some Giants with us. I'm having a hard time finding Giants fans, but
listen,
that's neither here nor there, Dave.
I don't want to talk about that team.
Hey, you're not alone there, man.
And I'm not going to want to talk about them, especially after the Cowboys, probably shut them out again 40-0 or whatever the week 1 score was. That's going to be ugly, and we'll talk about that game later on in the show when we look ahead to week 10.
Yes, sir, we will. Well, Dave, like most Monday night games, this week's was one of the uglier ones, except for Austin Eckler, who was the star of the show. However, the main talking point of this game was the Jets offense. The Jets offense have scored 8 offensive TDs in 8 games, and it's clearly what's holding them back. Is there anything they can do to fix that side of the ball?
I was one of the unfortunate 70,000 people who was at the Jets-Giants game 2 weeks ago. Which was easily the worst football game I've ever attended, and maybe the worst football game I've ever seen. And I've gone to some bad high school football games. I mean, it was just part of what made it so bad is it was raining the whole time. The seats I was in are not covered. We don't have a retractable roof like that nice stadium you've got in Dallas. And so it was pretty miserable to be out there and then watching, 24 punts, 23 first downs or 24 first downs, 23 points. And then, the Jets a week later don't look any better on offense. In fact, in that Giant game, they just had 7 points until the very end of the game, and they got the 2 field goals, the one to tie and the one to win. And then against the Chargers, they didn't even score a touchdown. They just got 2 field goals. And those are not elite defenses, the Giants and the Chargers. Those are, kind of, the Chargers have been bad against the pass. Those are kind of average at best defenses. So the Jets, they I think probably had an opportunity at the trade deadline to maybe try to trade for a quarterback. There weren't exactly a lot of them out there, but yeah. Josh Dobbs was available. I'd rather have him than Zach Wilson. You saw it on Monday night. Wilson has played a little bit better. He certainly played well in the Kansas City game about a month ago, but he still holds the ball too long. He doesn't seem to have that much of a pocket presence or sense pressure. He really is locked in on one guy and one guy only, it feels like. A lot of forced throws to Garrett Wilson when he's not open, and then just a lot of inaccurate throws. At this point, I don't think there's a free agent quarterback out there that could make a difference for them. I know the Rams just signed Carson Wentz. I don't think he would be the answer. Despite everything you hear about Aaron Rodgers' miracle Achilles recovery, I don't think he's playing, any time before it matters in terms of making the playoffs. So I think they're stuck with the hand they have, and they have to hope that they can be in enough games where their defense just keeps it close. Maybe they get a key turnover or special teams play and pull out a bunch of ugly wins to try to make the playoffs. I don't really think that that Wilson is going to improve enough to make a difference. You've watched this team too. Any different thoughts?
No, just if the Jets could possibly trade for a 4-time NFL MVP, I think that would fix all their problems.
Yeah, exactly. And then have him play one series. Unbelievable.
I think he had more passing yards pregame Aaron Rodgers than Zach Wilson did all game, I think.
Yeah, it's tough to watch. But on the other side of the ball, Paul, that the Chargers have won 2 in a row. They're 4-4 now. Their defense has started to play a little bit better, which obviously that was the main problem early in the season. But to me, something with this team still doesn't really look right. I mean, they were without Austin Eckler for a bunch of weeks. He's back now. Mike Williams is out. Josh Palmer's out. They've had a lot of injuries. Keenan Allen's been kind of the one constant there with Justin Herbert. Is this a playoff team, do you think? How do they look to you?
Yeah, not, with that defense missing Mike Williams, who's not coming back. Justin Herbert, who probably is still being affected by that broken, ring finger, middle finger on his hand,
on his
left hand.
Yeah.
I know, I understand it's on his non-throwing hand, but I think it's still affecting him. And plus you add in the coach who, I haven't watched the Chargers game in a little while since the Monday night game against the Cowboys, but who just has always never put his team in a position to win, always kind of looks out against the worst teams that are somehow worse than the Chargers. I can't see them as a playoff team, especially with the pieces missing on offense.
Yeah, I think also, the AFC is somewhat loaded, and it's not just the AFC North. You've got at least the Bills and the Dolphins in the AFC East that should be in playoff contention. You've got all 4 teams in the AFC North. Maybe you've got the Texans or Colts if they get hot alongside the Jaguars. Probably not. So it's going to be tough. I mean, there's going to be, probably 9 teams fighting for 7 spots, something like that. A tough test this weekend. They have the Lions coming in. If they can win that game and, make it 3 in a row and get to 5-4, with a win over a quality opponent like that, then we can revisit it next week. But I think this is a big game for them because they don't want to get back under 500, obviously, after, just finally getting out from under 500.
Right. So, Dave, sorry for the delay there.
I'm spacing here a little bit. This is
no worries.
We've been off for a couple weeks, folks, so I apologize. So now we're gonna get into our team segment, and this is where Paul, the Cowboy fan, David, the Dolphin fan, we reflect on how our teams did this past week, and unfortunately, we both teams took losses in kind of key measuring games. That they were playing the 2 teams that went to the Super Bowl last year, both on the road, although Miami was at a neutral site in in Germany, to play the Chiefs. Both teams had a chance at the end to either tie or win, and came up short on their final drive. The Cowboys got all the way, deep into the red zone. The Dolphins kind of stalled outside the 20 and had kind of 2 brain fart plays to end the game. So it was frustrating, I think, for both teams because they were both kind of right there against a team they know they're going to have to beat at some point if they want to go to a Super Bowl themselves, in all likelihood. So let me ask you, Paul, the Cowboys came close. But, now they've lost 2 in a row going back to last year to the Eagles, which is kind of, if the Cowboys don't want to be a wild card and have to go on the road like they had to do last year to try to get deep into the playoffs, this is the team they have to beat. How do you think they measure up? How close do you think these two teams are after seeing them play their first of 2 in Philly?
They're closer than I initially thought. When you look at the records, I mean, it's clear that Philadelphia is the better team. With that being said, after watching the game on Sunday night, the way Dak's been playing these last 3 weeks, I think he's playing with motivated. I think he's playing determined, and our offensive line, man, has just kind of been a weak link for this offense, and then the lack of the running game is really hurting. We're relying a lot on Dak. Not to mention my guy CD Piglet, my co-host of the Cowboys podcast, he mentioned that the defense hasn't really been the stalwart that it has been in years past. Not just this past game, but for a couple of weeks now. And when he brought that to light, it kind of made me realize that if this team isn't really forcing turnovers, it has to almost play perfect to give us a chance to win, just because of the issues with the offensive line and everything else. And I do think we're close, but Philly, I do think, is the better overall team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the one thing that's surprising this year, and I agree, Dallas's defense, when they're playing really bad teams, their defense kind of goes off.
Yeah.
And when they're playing better teams, you don't see it as much. And they're not as formidable. The Eagles' defense is almost like below average at this point, which is really surprising when you look at the pieces on that defense. But look, they only have 1 loss, and they're the only team in the NFL that only has 1 loss. So they're obviously doing enough right to keep getting wins. But their defense is allowing teams to hang with them, not just, the Cowboys obviously should hang with them, but a week before the Commanders, the Jets before that. So they're not the unit from last year that, set an NFL record for sacks in a season. They're getting some sacks, but their secondary is pretty vulnerable. So I think the Cowboys are closer to them, and that's the main reason for me. And now with Dallas Goedert out, which is a key piece of their offense, that might weaken them further as a team. So
yeah,
let's see. I mean, they get the bye week, which is always good because Hurts I don't think he's 100%. He looked a little gimpy at times. So we'll see how they do coming out of the bye. I know they have some tough games when they come back.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your Dolphins, Dave. And Miami, man, it's surprising they haven't beaten a team with a winning record in more than a year, which is just shocking to me. How worried are you that Miami can only beat the bad teams and can't measure up to a better competition?
Well, that's the question. I mean, that everyone's pointing out and everyone's asking. When you look at their schedule this year, they've pounded bad teams. They beat up on the Panthers and the Broncos, who are playing better now, but at the time were pretty terrible. The Giants, the Patriots twice. Their only quote unquote quality win was against the Chargers in week 1. And the 3 losses are the Bills, the Eagles, and the Chiefs, which are, coming into the year, at least you'd say maybe the 3 best teams in the NFL or 3 of the 5 best.
Yeah.
At least this one was close. I took a couple good things away from this loss. One, they went down 21-0 after that kind of weird fumble 6 at the end of the first half when they were driving for points. So that was one really pivotal, like 10-point at least swing, maybe 14-point swing. And they were down 21-0, and they didn't give up another point. I mean, they shut the Chiefs out in the second half. Their defense, Jalen Ramsey is making a difference. I think since he's been back the last 2 weeks, their defense has been more solid, and Jalen Phillips also is back healthy. Now they get the bye week, a week for the whole defense to get healthier. Xavier Howard, he's also been struggling with a groin injury. I think Vic Fangio is going to have that defense playing better than what we're used to from the Dolphins. And if they could start winning some games where they don't have to rely on their offense to score 30 plus points. That'll be good for them. So the schedule's weird for them. The next 5 weeks when they come out of the bye, they got 2 with the Jets in that 5 games, and they have, I think, the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Titans. So it's a pretty easy overall stretch. And then they finish the last 3. I forget the order. I think it's Dallas in week 16, at Baltimore in week 17, and then at home against the Bills in week 18. So if they're going to beat some good teams, that's going to be the time to do it. We'll have to see what their record is going into those games and how badly they need them and how badly the other 3 teams need those games. But that's going to be, and look, we all know how the NFL works. The way a team is playing in week 10 could be really different than the way they're playing in week 15 or in week 2. So I don't know how good those 3 teams will be at the time. I would not want to play the Ravens this week. I'd be okay playing the Bills this week. The Cowboys are the Cowboys. They've been pretty consistent this year. But we'll see. I mean, am I worried they can't beat a good team? Yes. Do I think they're a good team? I do. So it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I like what you said about the defense stepping up and not putting so much pressure on the offense to score so many points, and with bringing back Jalen Ramsey and Vic Fangio, kind of figuring things out. And you guys are also missing 3? Was it 3 or is it now 2 starting offensive linemen? I mean, you guys have been dealing with some health issues too, so you probably will be clicking, getting into sync right at the most important part of the season. So that's something, that's kind of the silver lining there.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the offensive line, because I had that down in my notes and forgot to say anything about that. I mean, that's just been a problem all year. Tua gets the ball out quick. He hasn't been sacked that much, but, they're a real timing offense. And even with him getting it out quick, you need the line to give him at least the time to do that. And run blocking, obviously, they've run the ball really well this year. I think in some ways that's been in spite of their offensive line, not because of it. It's part of that is just the Shanahan scheme that McDaniel brought over. There's just nice creases, and Mostert and a chain are fast. They hit those creases very quickly and get into the open field. So, hopefully the bye week, they can get the offensive line a little bit healthier, keep more of their starting 5 in there every week. And I think that'll obviously, and you've seen it with the Cowboys too, when your line is not playing as well as it can, things don't go as well. That's a pretty obvious thing in football. So we'll see. Losing to the Chiefs isn't the worst thing, right? I mean, they're the Super Bowl
exactly,
champions. Losing to the Eagles isn't the worst thing. They went to the Super Bowl last year. Like, you can't overreact to it. And both teams played close games. So I think you and I can both hold our head high and still be upset with a loss and look forward to the future. Now, your team gets to play right away, which is good, and they get to beat up on a bad team. The Dolphins have a week to lick their wounds and then come back against the Raiders in week 11. So we haven't had a show for a couple weeks, and so a lot has changed in the NFL. Like the last time we spoke, the 49ers were coming off their only loss of the year. Now they've lost 3 in a row. So I'm guessing, that for both of us, our power rankings have changed some since we last did a show. So why don't you go first, Paul? Why don't you give me your top 10, bottom 3, what we call the power 10 and the power outage, and then I'll give mine.
Okay, so I'll start with the top 10 here. Number 1, Philadelphia Eagles. Number 2, Kansas City Chiefs. Number 3, the Baltimore Ravens have leapfrogged the San Francisco 49ers. Number 4, I have the San Francisco 49ers. Number 5, the Cincinnati Bengals making their biggest rise so far this year. Number 6, I have the Detroit Lions. Number 7, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 8, Dave, don't be offended, I have your Miami Dolphins. Number 9, I have the Dallas Cowboys. And number 10, I have the Seattle Seahawks.
I think Oh, no, we don't have the same 10 teams because our number 10s are different. I think our first 9 are all the same, just in different order. But before I give mine, what's your bottom 3?
Oh,
Who
sorry, in
teams?
the power outage rankings, number 1, the Carolina Panthers, number 2, the Arizona Cardinals, and number 3, the Tennessee Titans.
The Titans, really? Okay.
I like the Titans, but they've got a lot of work to do with that team, man.
Okay, well, that's fair. So my top 10, I got the Chiefs at the top, and really for me, the reason is their defense. Their offense isn't playing that well.
Yeah.
That Steve Spagnuolo defense has really impressed me this week against the Dolphins, and they've been doing that all year. That's why they're, as much as Mahomes and Reed are why they're winning, their defense is why they're winning. So I have them at number 1. I have the Ravens at number 2. I have the Eagles at number 3. The Bengals at number 4, the Lions at number 5, the Jaguars 6, the 49ers have dropped for me all the way down to 7, and that's what 3 losses will do.
Yeah.
I have your Cowboys at 8, my Dolphins at 9, and number 10, I have the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, so I have 3 AFC North teams in my list, and I don't have the Buffalo Bills in there right now. But I would have them next at number 11. My bottom 3, I have Carolina as the bottom team, the worst team in the NFL. And then I have the New England Patriots at number, whatever that is, number 31. And then I still have the Bears at number 30. Yeah, I still think they're pretty bad. I mean, with Justin Fields back, they'll be better. I'm sort of basing it on the product I've seen the last couple weeks.
That's fair. That's fair. If they were to have an upset this week, man, it'll be hard to keep the Houston Texans out of the top 10, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because this would be quite an upset if they
exactly
can this week.
Exactly. We're going to talk a little bit about them here soon. So, Dave, here we are. We're going to start talking about our player performances of the week. First off, we're going to talk about our Week 9 duds. Dave, give me your Week 9 AFC and NFC dud.
You want to do the duds before the performances of the week?
I get maybe those I ended it wrong here on the StreamYard chat. So yeah, let's start off with the good, Dave. Let's start off with the players. Okay. Your player or team.
Okay, so for me, for the AFC, as good as CJ Stroud was this week, I'm gonna give it to the Baltimore Ravens, their entire team. That was I would say that was the shellacking of the year. Their win over the Seahawks, 37-3. And I say that because the Seahawks are a good team. They came in, whatever they came in, 5-2. The first downs were 29-6. The rushing yards were 298-28. And the time of possession was like 41 minutes to 19 minutes. I mean, it was
my goodness.
Seriously might have been the most one-sided game of the season. So as good as CJ Stroud was, and as amazing as that double comeback he did was, I'm giving it to the Ravens. And in the NFC, it has to be Josh Dobbs. I mean,
I like that.
The guy'd been there for 5 days, wasn't expecting to play. He was like almost like an emergency quarterback. And then, what's his name? Jalen Hall. I don't even know what his name is. Jaron Hall. Yeah, he gets hurt. Dobbs has to go in. He doesn't know the playbook. He doesn't know the calls. He doesn't even know half the guys' names. And they pull out, and he does his thing like he's done before, coming to these teams cold. And they win 31-28 in a weird game like everything about that game was super strange. But anyway, they win. They pull off the big upset. So he's mine. Who are your players of the week for Week 9? Players or team?
Yeah, so AFC pretty easy for me, Dave. You mentioned already. CJ Stroud set the single-game rookie record for passing yards, led the game-winning touchdown drive, and threw 5 touchdowns and had 0 interceptions. I mean, for a rookie, my goodness, what an incredible performance. And then in the NFC, I'm going with Taysom Hill. Reason being is he had a receiving and a passing touchdown in Week 9 and became only the third player in NFL history to have 10 receiving, 10 rushing, and 10 passing touchdowns. I didn't think he'd be much of anything after Sean Payton left, but hey, here he is year 2 without Sean Payton, and he's still producing. So kudos to him.
He's the number 1 tight end in fantasy over the last 3 weeks, and he basically functions as their goal line QB.
Yeah.
Right? It's bad from a fantasy perspective. It's if you got Derek Carr or Alvin Kamara, every time he comes in, you're like,
right, yeah.
touchdown, but he gets it done, man. It's amazing. And you mentioned the 3 different ways, 10 touchdowns, and that only 3 players have done that. The last one was Frank Gifford, and that was in like the late 50s, early 60s. So it's something that hadn't been done in a really long time. And I think that, like, as fans and or as analysts who cover sports, it's always really fun when there are players who can do multiple things, like whether it's Ohtani in baseball, pitching and hitting, or, like a Bo Jackson or a Deion Sanders playing 2 sports. And then, or like if there was an NFL player that played like offense and defense. But just seeing Taysom Hill, like, he's a quarterback, a receiver, and a running back. It's just cool to see. It would be great if more teams, had a guy like that. And you wonder, since it's a copycat league, if, maybe there's another Taysom Hill out there, and that other teams will start, trying to find guys like that, because the Saints are one of the more efficient red zone teams in the NFL, and he's a big part of that. So I like that call. Let's move on to the duds of the week. Paul, who are your AFC and NFC duds from Week 9?
My AFC dud is the Buffalo Bills coaching staff, Dave. In the last 3 games, Allen has thrown the ball almost 40 times per game, and Buffalo has lost 2 of those 3 games. They refused to use James Cook, and their running backs had a combined 13 touches in Week 9, which, of course, we know that the Bills lost that game. They just put entirely too much pressure on Josh Allen. Really, I know they've got good receivers, and they've tried to help him, but I don't know, that they just seem to rely on him too much, and I don't understand it. And then my NFC dud of the week, Arthur Smith, man. I mean, if you just see how he's using Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, I don't have to go too much more into that, but my goodness, I don't know what this guy's doing.
Yeah, you're not the only one. And, obviously fantasy managers are beside themselves. Jonnu Smith gets 2 of the 3 plays when they get inside the 5. And I saw this. Bijan Robinson, I think, only has 1 carry inside the 5-yard line this year.
Yeah, only 1.
And I guess Arthur Smith, when, he doesn't like being asked about this stuff, like most coaches, and he gets pissed off that people, care so much about fantasy football, and that's part of the reason they ask him these questions. But I thought I saw him say something to the effect of, having Bijan out there, he ends up being a decoy, and it enables other players, to be more open and have more space, and that it's working. So that's not the answer anyone wants to hear, but
yeah,
that's what he's saying. So, he's replaced, if it was Bill Belichick, a while back, with like James White, and like, you didn't know which running back to start, and, Kyle Shanahan before they had McCaffrey. I think Arthur Smith is wearing the crown right now as the most hated coach from the fantasy community, without question.
No doubt.
So there's that. All right. So for me, we talked about it before, but my dud of the week is Zach Wilson and the Jets. The Chargers, coming into that game, I think they had given up, they had one of the bottom pass defenses in the NFL, like bottom 3. And all the Jets managed was 2 field goals at home in prime time. So I'll give them my AFC dud of the week. And my NFC dud of the week, I'm going to do something a little different this week. I'm giving it to the NFC West, right? So the 49ers didn't play this week. The Rams, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals did play, 3 teams, and they combined for 9 points. just abysmal. I mean, look, two of them were starting quarterbacks who shouldn't start in the NFL, and it was kind of an emergency situation for both the Rams and the Cardinals. But still, man, 9 points across 3 teams is just embarrassing. The 49ers will be back this week to hopefully make that division look a little better, but that's my NFC dud of the week.
All right, Dave, moving on to our surprises of week 9. What team or player was the biggest week 9 surprise for you?
So I mentioned it earlier in my player of the week. I mean, it has to be, for me, Josh Dobbs and the Vikings. Like, it's a surprise that he was in the game. Sure. And when he first came in, I think he turned the ball over right away, or something bad happened when
he had a safety, I believe, right?
Yes, a safety. That's it. Yeah. But he regrouped and they won the game. And so for me, like, I think this game was almost a throwaway for the Vikings. Knowing they really didn't have a quarterback. And they end up winning the game. So that was the biggest surprise for me. How about for you?
Yeah, Josh Dobbs and the Minnesota Vikings. Dobbs has been in Minnesota for maybe a week, was forced to play in the game due to injury, and led the Vikings to victory. I mean, it's easy to root for Josh Dobbs just because he seems like a good person. I know he's a literal rocket scientist. He goes and beats the Cowboys, the Cardinals, with the Cardinals in week 4, and the Cardinals haven't won a game since then. It's just a cool story, man. I like to hear stories like that in the NFL.
100%. And I saw this. This is not my stat of the week. We're going to get to stats in a second, but for the 3 teams he's played for, all of whom he's played for this calendar year, his time from being signed to playing in a game, I think with the Titans, was 8 days back in January. With the Cardinals, it was like a couple of weeks. I think it was 19 days. After they abruptly cut what's his name, McCown in the preseason, and then with the Vikings it was 5 days. So he's got to be the smartest guy in the NFL, because he comes in and immediately is able to figure out what he's supposed to do. So absolutely amazing. Now we're going to get to what might be my favorite segment of the show each week, the stat of the week. Paul, what is your stat of the week coming out of week 9?
This was a pretty crazy stat for me, Dave, when I saw it. But prior to week 9, the Dallas Cowboys had only 1 lead change in 7 games.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
that stat popped up, and I'm just like, my goodness, how is that even possible?
Yeah, they've had a weird season that way. Like they haven't had a lot of normal games. You think back to the Giant game, the Patriot game. They've had games that were so one-sided. And the games they lost, like San Francisco, they were behind the whole game. Yeah. So my stat of the week is going to come out of the Browns Cardinals game. So the Cardinals ran 48 plays on Sunday, and they had 58 net yards for an average of something like 1.2 yards per play, which is pretty much as bad as it gets. So that's my stat of the week.
My goodness,
there are a lot of good stats this week too. I don't know if you saw this one, that the Steelers have been outgained in every game they've played, and they're 5-3, which is another good one. But
yeah, that is really good.
Yeah, we'll stop there with the statistics, because there were a lot of kooky ones this past week.
Yes, sir. All right, Dave. So we will talk a little bit about the Ravens. In week 9, the Ravens decimated yet another NFC playoff hopeful. Are they the NFL's most complete team right now?
They certainly right now, I think, are playing better than anyone, and they're the team I'd maybe least like to play right now, because they are playing really well on both sides of the ball. But I'm still going to go with the Chiefs. A kind of a longer term answer. I think the way their defense is playing, and the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes, I think by the end of the year, whether it's Rashee Rice or someone else, I think they're some receivers going to kind of emerge to give them a threat alongside Travis Kelce. I think that when push comes to shove in the playoffs, they have the sideline, the coaching staff I'd want the most. So I'll still say the Chiefs, but I do think that the Ravens are making the case. right now that they're the best rounded team in the NFL. What do you think it's them, or do you got someone else in mind?
No, I want to say I know they're on a 3-game losing streak, but it had been San Francisco. That being said, it's kind of crazy that as good as San Francisco is, they lose Debo Samuel, who's a good weapon for them, and they also lose Trent Williams. Anytime you lose your left tackle, that's going to hurt. But just the way that they've kind of crumbled with those 2 losses, it's surprising to me. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to go against the Ravens. They really are the most complete team right now. Maybe Detroit Lions being a close second, but the Ravens had their way with them. So, that argument can go either way.
Yeah. I think it is those 2, though, right now, because like I said, the Eagles, their defense just isn't good enough to be in that conversation yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that defense could easily come together, though, as we, as they get healthier and play some more games. So you mentioned CJ Stroud. I mentioned him too. It was one of the great rookie performances of all time, honestly, in one game, at least for a quarterback. He led his team on 2 game-winning drives at the end of the game. One wasn't enough because then the Bucs scored, and then he had less time, and he came back down and did it again. Are the Texans a contender, or do you think this is just a year where let all these young guys get as many reps as they can? They got a young receiving core. They got some key young pieces on defense, and build for the future. What do you think?
Initially I thought this would be a rebuilding developmental year for Houston, but the AFC is somewhat weak outside of maybe 4 teams. I think Houston could easily sneak into one of the 2 wild card spots. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. Honestly, you mentioned a complete team. They have a solid secondary. Their offense is clicking, and they've got a good coaching staff too. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they were the 7th seed.
Yeah, the one thing that has concerned me with them the most is they really can't run the ball. They've really struggled to run the ball, and that puts a lot of pressure on a young quarterback if they can't, figure something out with that running game. And so far, they've kind of gotten away with it, and they're at 500. Or are they 4-4? I think they're 4-4.
Yeah, 4-4 right now.
Way better than anyone thought they'd be right now. But I don't think. I think the AFC is pretty strong, and I don't see them being in the playoffs this year. But I think unless they can catch the Jaguars and win the division. But I do think that next year we'll be talking about them in the preseason as a team, to kind of watch out for as a riser in the AFC.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to think, you look at the AFC North could potentially have 3, if not 4 teams in the playoffs somehow. Which would be crazy. All right, so mentioning the AFC North, the Steelers keep winning ugly, low-scoring games, and Deshaun Watson really doesn't look right. If the season ended today, all 4 NFC North teams would make the playoffs. Which one is most likely to fall short and not get in?
I have to say, even though Mike Tomlin is, probably easily the best coach in that division, and just always has his team ready to play and in games, I just don't think the Steelers are that good. I think their defense is decent and can keep them in games. And TJ Watt is a difference maker. Highsmith's a really good player. Minkah Fitzpatrick's a really good player when he's healthy. But that offense, man, Kenny Pickett is an average quarterback at best, and their offense is boring. Their running game is slow. It's a little better when Jaylen Warren's in there. They just don't inspire a lot of confidence when you watch them. And I think their luck's going to run out. You can't keep getting outgained every game, hanging around, not doing anything on offense for 55 minutes and then pulling out wins. It's worked so far for them, but those teams are all going to have to play each other. And I think that's where the Steelers will come up short, going up against 3 really, really good defenses in that division. So they'd be my choice. even though I don't think Deshaun Watson looks good, and I worry about the Browns, being too reliant on their defense and not having, losing Nick Chubb was a huge loss for them. But what do you think? Which of these AFC North teams do you think is most likely to miss?
I'd have to go with the Steelers as well, just because Matt Canada, man, may be the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL right now. With you look at the pieces that he has, you can't trust him. And as they've looked better with the return of Deontay Johnson, but I just haven't seen enough to think that they can take the step to make the playoffs, make a run for the playoffs, rather.
All right, so we're in agreement on that one. That's good. So it's been a crazy season in that 9 rookie QBs have started games this year, which ties the NFL record, believe it or not. And we're only 9 weeks in, and 7 rookie QBs started games this past week. And then when Tommy DeVito came in for the Giants, when Daniel Jones got hurt, it made it 8. First off, can you remember anything like this? So many quarterbacks have gotten hurt this year, and so many of the backups, or in some cases, it's third stringers, are rookies. But outside of CJ Stroud, are there any of the rookie QBs you've been particularly impressed with?
I cannot remember ever seeing a season like this, Dave. But as far as rookie quarterbacks go, Richardson was showing a lot of promise before he got injured. Tyson Bagent is showing he belongs maybe on a roster and how he's played on a roster despite the turnovers and how he's played. I also think Will Levis might surprise people with a full off season. Outside of those 3 guys, I don't know. I think the jury's still out on Bryce Young. I don't watch a lot of Carolina games, but anybody that I hear talk about Bryce Young says that there's, haven't been very impressed. I know he's a rookie and he's playing like a rookie, but for being the number 1 overall pick, I mean, he's being compared to CJ Stroud, which isn't really fair to not just Bryce Young, but some other quarterbacks in the league as well. I don't know, maybe feel like Bryce Young might struggle for a while before he starts to get going, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Richardson looked good before he got hurt. I do think Levis has shown really well in the 2 games he's played. I mean, he didn't beat the Steelers and he didn't throw any touchdowns, but he played pretty well again. And he kind of just looks like he has it. He's got poise. He's not scared. Mm-hmm. They've already announced now that he's the starter and Tannehill's the backup. And I think that's the smart thing to do if you're them. I mean, Tannehill's a free agent at the end of the season. I'm a little surprised they didn't trade him. Like I could think of a team that's only 30 miles from where my house is that could use him. Maybe could use Ryan Tannehill, but maybe he's a good mentor. And that's a good thing to have in the quarterback room if you're trying to develop a rookie. So I can understand and maybe it doesn't work with Levis and the Titans are still kind of in it. So I guess it made sense to keep him around, but I'm curious to see how Levis does now over the next few weeks. Because I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch.
Absolutely. So Dave, we're going to talk a little bit about Thursday night football here. This matchup, man, if it doesn't get any more Thursday night football than this. 1-7, the Panthers at the 2-7 Bears. Is this the worst matchup in the history of Thursday night football, and will you watch?
It probably is the worst matchup in Thursday night football, although there were some really bad ones. Last year there was that Colts Broncos game, although they weren't like as bad teams that it was all field goals and it went to overtime. It was a horrible game. But on paper, this is up there. I will watch because I'm a football junkie and, and I'm sure I got Adam Thielen on my, my main fantasy team. So I'll watch just to see, what he does. And I'm also just kind of curious if Justin Fields plays, how much better the Bears look with him. And I'd like to get another look at Bryce Young. I haven't seen that much. I saw the game where they played the Dolphins, and I've seen, on my Sunday ticket screen where they're in one of the 4 boxes sometimes. But I'm curious to see what he looks like. How about you? Are you going to torture yourself and pay attention to this game?
I don't think I've watched Thursday night football this year, only because that's one of the few nights where I can spend time with the wife and the son, and not have to do something for podcasting or fantasy or anything like that. So I probably won't watch. I'll keep up with the game on Sleeper like I usually do. But yeah, I think this could be. We'll talk about it later, but I don't know. Two bad teams, two kind of bad defenses. This could be one of those high scoring affairs that kind of sets the tone for the fantasy week.
Yeah, well, that would be good. And an interesting subplot to this game is that Chicago has Carolina's first round pick, and I think if the season ended today, Chicago would probably have like the first and third pick or the first and fourth pick. So do you think that gives the Bears any added incentive to just send the Panthers to 1-8 and keep them with the worst record in football, or does it not matter?
I got one word, Dave. Just absolutely.
Okay. They kind of win either way, right? Like if the Bears, if they both come out of this game 2-8, well, I guess it would be 2-7 and 2-8. It either way, the Bears are likely to have two of the top 5 picks next year. And that'll be interesting as to whether they look at a quarterback or stick with Justin Fields. So that's another story for another podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw at one point on Sunday that the Bears had the first and second overall picks, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
A lot probably depends on whether Justin Fields and to a lesser extent Khalil Herbert make it back from injury to play in this game. But who are you starting in fantasy from this one?
To your point earlier, I think at least on the Chicago side, if Fields plays, the Panthers have not been a good defense. They've been a pretty fantasy-friendly defense. They're missing both of their starting corners. I think you play Fields, you play DJ Moore, you play Cole Kmet. Not really sure about, the running backs. If Khalil Herbert's back, then it's kind of hard to trust any of the three.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd maybe stay away in that case. If he's not back, I think you fire up Deontay Foreman. I mean, the Panthers have especially been vulnerable to running backs. So, you maybe not Roschon. Maybe if Khalil Herbert's back, he's flex worthy. That's just a little risky. And then on the Carolina side, fewer players. I think it's really just Adam Thielen and probably Chuba Hubbard.
Right.
He seems to have the upper hand on Miles Sanders right now, and that's a good matchup too against the Bears. How about you?
Also, if Field starts, if Field starts, everybody you mentioned, and I think a case could be made for Darnell Mooney. He's kind of starting to show out a little bit here with Tyson Bagent. I don't know if that will continue with Fields, but that deep ball threat's always nice to have.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so we'll do our look at the rest of the Week 10 slate here and kind of go through some of our regular weekly features. What's your game of the week candidate? What game are you most looking forward to this week?
After his performance in Week 9 and his first real test of the season, give me C.J. Stroud and the Texans versus Joe Burrow and the Bengals. That's a game I want to watch.
That's a good one. I thought about that one. But for me, it's the 49ers at the Jaguars. And, these are two teams that should make the playoffs this year, going in different directions. The Jaguars, I think, have the longest winning streak in the NFL right now. They've won 5 in a row. The 49ers have lost 3 in a row. Both teams coming off a bye, so they're kind of equally rested. Maybe Deebo Samuel's back. Maybe Zay Jones comes back with the Jaguars, and both teams are kind of plus Trent Williams. Maybe everyone's as much full strength as you can be in Week 10. It's an important game for both teams. So, it's one that the Jaguars probably can afford to lose a little more than the 49ers. They don't want to lose 4 in a row, but that's the one I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah, we're talking about our game of the week, Dave. Which game is your dud of the week?
Cover your ears. It's the Giants at the Cowboys. After what happened in Week 1 and with Tommy DeVito starting, this is going to be ugly. I mean, I don't see any way this game is not just horrible football to watch. And I think even for Cowboy fans, you could be mowing the lawn by the second half. So I think this is just, the line is 15.5, which might be the biggest betting line we've seen so far this year. So I think this is being handicapped as the most lopsided game of the season, and I would actually bet the Cowboys. What's your dud of the week?
Yeah, just to kind of touch on your point, Dave, this could be a get-right game for the Cowboys defense for sure. But, man, my dud of the week, Raiders and the Jets. My goodness, Zach Wilson and Aiden O'Connell. Come on, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I don't know. The Raiders, at least with under Antonio Pierce, they looked good last week, and maybe it's an interesting game from that perspective. And it's two teams that I think, are they both 4-4? Or maybe the Raiders are 3-5. I'm not sure, but it's an important game for both teams. They're both kind of like hanging around the fringes of wild card world. So
right.
I don't want to watch it either. I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty one.
Like a train wreck, but you can't take your eyes off of it.
Exactly. So this is one we like to do every week. What's your sneaky shootout of the week, Paul?
Yeah, it's probably not that sneaky, but Buffalo and Denver should be an interesting game, Dave. I know Buffalo's working out some kinks on offense, kind of still trying to figure things out, and Denver don't look now, but they've started to kind of figure some things out. I believe they're on a 2-game winning streak prior to entering their bye week. So, who knows? I think that could be a high-scoring affair there.
That's fair. Mine is Washington at Seattle. The over-under for this is 44.5, and the Commanders have played in a lot of shootouts this year. They don't have a good defense, and they traded away their starting defensive ends 2 weeks ago. Seattle kind of needs a get-right game after what happened to them last week. I think they need to get Geno going. They need to get DK Metcalf going. Those have been two of the most disappointing performers in fantasy this year. But Sam Howell is, he's chucking it like 40 to 50 times a game, and he's got weapons, and neither of these teams has a great defense. It is supposed to rain, so that could temper this a little bit, but I like the over in that game, and I like this to be, a game where both teams could be right around 30 points.
Yeah, that should be a fun game to watch. All right, Dave, which team has the biggest chance of pulling off an upset?
So I looked at the betting lines this week, and there aren't that many big ones. Almost all the games are within 3 points, except for a few. But I'm going to go with the Jaguars. They're getting 3 points at home. I know the 49ers are going to just want to come in and put the beat down on someone and get this turned around and get back to winning every week. But, the Jaguars' defense has been better than expected. Brock Purdy has not played well the last couple times out. And, I think this will be a close game, a one-possession game at the end. And I like the Jaguars to stay with them and have a good chance to either win outright or cover the number, at getting 3. I know this isn't a gambling pod, but I like them to win outright. I mean, I think they have a good chance to do so. Who do you think has the best chance to pull off an upset this week? And don't say the Giants, please.
My goodness, no.
Because I just won't believe you. I'll be incapable of believing you.
No, so it's a little early for April Fool's, Dave. But if Kyler Murray plays, give me Arizona to upset the Falcons.
I like that one, and he is supposed to play. I mean,
yeah.
Expecting him to play, and that's, we haven't really talked about it, but that's definitely an interesting subplot for the week, is his return and what it could mean for that team. So we'll do a little fantasy talk now, as we always do each week. With the Dolphins and the Eagles on bye, and they're the two highest scoring teams in the NFL this year, and the two highest scoring wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill in reverse order, actually, plus Jalen Hurts, plus Raheem Mostert, who's like a top 10 RB this year.
Yeah,
you got the Chiefs off, so Mahomes, Kelsey, and there's still a lot of injuries out there. From a fantasy standpoint, how are you approaching this week? What are your thoughts overall?
All right, Dave. My approach is don't be afraid to get weird. If you're like in a tight end premium, maybe start 2, 3 tight ends if that's the scoring format that you're in, or start players that are playing in games that are projected to be high scoring. I think that's something that might be a little overlooked too in weeks like this where high scoring players are on bye weeks. If you have a guy that maybe has just been more of a stash guy, but he's playing in the Buffalo Denver game or like a Brandon Johnson or something, and this is maybe the type of week to plug him in there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, I think what I was going to say is if you're short this week because you're missing, like in my main league, I have Tua and Tyreek, which has been crushing as a stack, but I need to replace both of them this week, and I do have decent options. But I'm also going to want to look at matchups to exploit where I can. So I have Geno as my backup, and I haven't played him yet this year, and I'm glad I haven't. I like the matchup this week, so I'm feeling pretty good about plugging him in against the Commanders. But I think in general, like what you said, it is a week to get a little creative. Use the waiver wire. Try to find good streamers. If you're out, a player like Kelsey or AJ Brown, like this is a weird week in that there are so many like overall top 20, I would say, or top 25 fantasy producers on bye. It might be a bit of a low scoring week in fantasy for that reason. And so you may not need as many points to win a matchup, depending on who your opponent has.
Yeah, that's a good point. It could be a very low scoring week for fantasy and just the NFL overall.
Yeah, last week certainly was. And there were some good teams on bye last week too, like the Lions and the Jaguars and the 49ers. So it's kind of a little bit like last week in that sense.
Yeah, true. So we talked a little bit about the Seahawks, Dave. You mentioned starting Geno. Geno and the entire Seahawks offense has really been struggling as of late. They get a bad Commanders defense at home. Is this a make or break game for Geno and that offense? Is he in danger of maybe being benched?
I don't think he's in danger of being benched, but I think if you went into a Seahawks chat room somewhere online, people are talking about Drew Lock. And I think if Geno gets off to a rough start in this game, maybe he throws a pick early, maybe there's a couple 3 and outs to start the game, you might hear some Drew Lock chants. I do think this is a big game for Geno because he really, that guy who shocked the world last year and was a top 10 fantasy QB and led the NFL in completion percentage and didn't turn the ball over and was super efficient. We just haven't seen that guy. And he's like the QB 15 or 16. DK Metcalf is like the wide receiver 40 or something to this point in the season. They just haven't gotten it going. In their defense, they've already played the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals, some really good defenses. So, that's not always an excuse, but I do think they've had a very tough schedule. They have a winning record. They're 5-3. So it's not all bad, but I do think Geno and that whole offense really need to click this week to silence the critics, get some confidence, and get them pointed in the right direction. And I think they will.
Agreed.
Yeah. You have any additional thoughts on that?
No, you brought up the point that I was going to bring out if you didn't mention it, but the defenses that they played in the 2 of the last 3 games, the defenses that they played where they've had those losses. They played the Browns and they played the Ravens, 2 really, really good defenses. So, I don't think Geno is getting benched, but Dave, I can guarantee if we were to go on Reddit, there's a start Drew Lock chat somewhere on that app.
Both of those games were on the road, right? They were at Cleveland and they were at, was the Cleveland game on the road? I can't remember, but yeah, it's been a tough schedule for them, and it'll eventually get easier. Some point they'll play the Cardinals again. That'll help.
Yeah.
So another team that's really been struggling lately offensively is the Packers. They haven't broken 20 points or scored more than 20 points in 6 straight games, and they got a tough game at Pittsburgh. Never an easy place to play. And on the flip side, the Steelers have only topped 20 points once in their last 5 games. So you have kind of two teams that have been boring and struggling on offense. So from a fantasy perspective, which players in this game are you confidently starting?
Because of the teams and players on bye, I feel like you have to start these guys if you have them. I mean, I think this could be a sneaky shootout game, and we know the Steelers have a good defense. The Packers defense has been solid, nothing special, but they can both create turnovers. That could give both teams maybe shorter fields, closer opportunities to the red zone. And Aaron Jones came back, was unleashed, so to speak, like Matt LaFleur had told everybody. He looked good in his game back, of course. And then you've got the running back duo of Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. I just, I would start these guys. I wouldn't say with confidence, but just in the hopes that you're going to get a TD, and sometimes that's really all you need from a guy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it depends on what else I have on my roster. That's always
the case. For sure, of course, yeah.
Questions. But in a vacuum, I'm confident about Aaron Jones. I'm confident about Deontay Johnson because I think he's just going to be Kenny Pickett's, especially with Freiermuth still out. Like, he's going to be kind of the short area and intermediate area guy. George Pickens, I would not confidently start him this week. And, Najee has played better the last couple of weeks. So I guess, he's certainly you could start him as an RB2 and maybe Jaylen Warren as a flex. But I'm pretty out on the Packers passing game this week. Jordan Love and those receivers, they just haven't been getting it done at all. Maybe Luke Musgrave because the tight end position's pretty weak, and he did score his first touchdown last week. But that's, that game can't be the dud of the week because it's an important game and they're traditionally good teams. But that game, that could be a game with a lot of punts, honestly.
Yeah, it could. It very well could. All right, Dave, we're going to talk a little bit about, some players who we like and dislike in fantasy this week. Which highly ranked player is your fade of the week?
So for me, that's Saquon Barkley. He's ranked as the RB10 this week, and he'll get the volume. I have no doubt about that. But the Giants' implied total this week is 11 points. I can't remember an implied total that low. They didn't score. Would they score 6 points against the Raiders last week? 7 points or 10 points against the Jets the week before. With DeVito under center. They're going up against the Cowboys defense that I'm sure would love to shut them out for a second time. So I think Saquon, look, will he get you 10 to 12, like half PPR points? Probably, because he'll probably have 25 carries for 70 yards and, 5 catches for 15 yards or 20 yards. So, I don't think he's going to be a total disaster, but I don't think he's going to find the end zone. And I'll fade him at his ranking for the week. How about for you?
Yeah, Dave, I hate to do this, and I know it's going to come back to haunt me, but I'm fading Bijan Robinson, man. Arthur Smith doesn't know what he's doing. We don't know what he's doing. He's not using him now. I can't expect him to use him anytime soon, or at least use him properly. So Bijan Robinson is my fade of the week.
Yeah, it's really frustrating when you think back to like Kyle Pitts last year and Bijan this year and Drake London, who just hasn't seemed to be able to stay healthy in his 2 seasons and produce consistently. Like you got 3 top 10 draft picks at skill positions, and none of them are just, the studs you expect them to be. Part of it is usage and the opportunities they get. So that is frustrating, and I like your answer. The flip side of that, which lower ranked player is your sleeper of the week in fantasy this week?
I'm going to go with my guy, Marquise Brown. You look at the Falcons defense, they've allowed the 3rd most touchdowns to receivers with 11. And even though Kyler Murray hasn't played a game this season, Brown has been getting the volume every week, averaging 8 targets a game. So I like his chance to have a big game.
Well, Paul, we almost got to the end of the show without one of us stealing the other's answer, because that's what I got written down on my show sheet is Hollywood Brown.
Hollywood.
I don't think there's a player more happy to see his quarterback get back.
My goodness, yeah.
They played together at Oklahoma. They got, they did well together last year when they were on the field at the same time before Kyler got hurt. And Hollywood's ranked as the wide receiver 26 this week, and I have him easily as a wide receiver 2. I won't be surprised if he finishes the week as, inside the top 15 at the position. So we are aligned.
So Dave, I don't want to interrupt you here, but we've got a first here. We've got our first comment of the show ever, and we've got a trade question here. Half PPR. Would you trade Keenan and Breece Hall for Jamar Chase, Kenneth? I don't know if that's Kenneth Gainwell or if that's the running back for the Seahawks.
I think it's got to be Kenneth Walker because you're getting
Kenneth Walker. And exactly, yeah. So just to recap here, half PPR, Keenan Allen, and Breece Hall for Jamar Chase, Kenneth Walker, and Zach Charbonnet. What are you doing there, Dave?
I'm assuming we're not talking dynasty, although even if we are, it's maybe it's a little bit
close
because Keenan Allen's the one player in the trade who isn't in his first or second or third year.
Yeah.
It depends on the rest of my roster. I probably would, because in Jamar Chase, well, here's the other thing is Chase got hurt last week. So I'd want to sort of very closely monitor whether he's going to play this week and whether they think this is something that's going to keep him out for a little bit. Breece Hall is great, but that Jets offense is so limiting.
Yeah.
I do think Keenan Allen is going to score close to the same points as Chase for the rest of the season, just because of the usage he's getting. So on second thought, maybe I'd pass on this. I kind of like having the two healthy guys. Ken Walker's been a little up and down this season. It's a pretty fair trade, I'll say that. The fact that I'd feel bad making the trade on either side, I'd feel like maybe I'm not getting enough. That means it's a good trade, right? Like if both sides walk away thinking they didn't get the best of it.
Right.
So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about this trade? I didn't answer his question because I'm stumped.
And Dynasty, I think I prefer the Chase, Kenneth, and Charbonnet side. And in redraft, man, I think I'm still probably leaning the Chase, Kenneth, and Charbonnet side. So yeah, I'd trade Keenan and Breece Hall for the Chase and Kenneth and Charbonnet side. I'd do that.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we appreciate who's the user? TH. We appreciate you chiming in with a question. Good stuff.
Yeah, first ever on the show. Appreciate you, TH.
Yeah, I love it. So I think I see where we are. I think you're up, Paul.
Yes, sir. Dave, who will be the highest scoring player of the week?
So I'm going to just go with the chalk answer and say Josh Allen. He's the highest scoring player of the year. Denver's a favorable matchup there at home.
Yeah.
And they're another team that really needs to kind of like get rolling. Their offense has sputtered since the Miami game. They're not running the ball, as you said. Curious to see how much they use Leonard Fournette this week. And if
good point.
How that all breaks down, but I'll just go with the chalk. Josh Allen seems to get a rushing touchdown every week and a couple passing touchdowns and end up with, 20 to 25 points. So I think he's the safe answer. Who's your answer?
All right, Dave, I'm going to go bold, and I'm going to say Geno Smith. Looking at the Washington's defense, their pass rush isn't what it was after trading away Sweat and Chase. And Seattle has one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. Pair that with a dynamic running back tandem and 3 dynamic receivers who can beat you all in different ways. I think Geno Smith is going to have a big week.
Well, you're going to hear all about that when I make my bold call. So you're stealing my.
I look forward to it, man.
Right, but I don't have him as my highest score of the week. Who's your highest scoring non-QB of the week?
I'll put my money on fresh off a bye week and well-rested Christian McCaffrey, Dave. How about you?
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious answer. I'm going to go with Joe Mixon. against Houston.
Okay, I like
you know,
that.
he had that one crazy game last year where he scored 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He hasn't been running, for a high yard per carry, but he's gotten into the end zone, I think, 1 or 2 weeks in a row. He had pretty good usage in the pass game last week. Kind of tough to throw on the Texans. Since the start of the 2022 season, I think they've given up the fewest or second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They do have a good secondary, as you said, and I could see, especially if Chase isn't at 100%, I could see a lot of underneath stuff and a lot of running, and the Bengals just trying to control the clock in this game and giving it to Mixon when they get close. So it's a bit of a long shot because he hasn't really been all that great this year, but he seems to always have one crazy game a season, and I'll bet on it for this week.
I like it. All right, Dave, here we are with our bold calls of the week. Week 10 edition. Dave, give me your bold call.
I kind of already gave it, but because of what I said about your Geno pick, but my bold call is that Geno Smith throws for 350 plus yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 of those touchdowns go to DK Metcalf.
Man, I would love that. DK needs to have a big game. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's really been missing in action. What's your bold call of the week, Paul?
My bold call of the week: the Dallas Cowboys defense will be the top 10 overall. Will be a top 10 overall fantasy scorer.
I don't think that's that bold. I think maybe Deron Bland gets his 4th pick 6 of the season or something like that.
Man, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, well, it could happen.
Yeah,
all right,
no doubt.
So I think we've made it to the end of the show, and we appreciate everyone sticking with us for this
Absolutely.
hour. And the question we got, we appreciate that too. Paul, remind everyone before we get out of here where they can find you on Twitter and where they can get at your content.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Ryan15, and my content can be found on both Twitter and YouTube. On Monday nights, me, my guy CD Piglet, and the newest member of the podcast are also the account manager, Brendan_Smith26. We recap the week previous of the Cowboys, and then on Friday nights, you can either find us with a guest or find us just the 3 of us talking about and predicting the Cowboys' upcoming game. And again, that's on Friday nights, and that's also on Twitter and YouTube. How about you, Dave?
Yep. You can find me on Twitter at PigskinPapers. Both P's are capitalized, and I post my content there, and I also post it on my blog, thepigskinpapers.com, and I'll have my Week 10 fantasy preview with starts, sits, and sleepers up by early tomorrow morning, so please check that out. And Paul, I think for next week, we are going to be airing on Thursday night, not Wednesday night, and tell people where they can find the show next week.
Yes, guys, you can find the show next week on the PSF app. That's going to be our new streaming platform, Dave and I. And I can't say what name to look for because we haven't figured out the name of the show yet, but we will make sure to share the link on Twitter and try to keep you guys updated prior to that stream.
Right. So download the app. That's P as in Paul, S as in Sam, F as in Frank, PSF. And if you download the app, there's a whole bunch of football chats on there and streaming shows in addition to ours, probably every day of the week. So it's a pretty cool app. Check it out. And we hope to see you all on our new platform next week.
Absolutely. Have a good night, guys.
Good night, Paul.
Good night, sir.